Welcome to Lattes Laundry, a podcast created to keep you company as you fold the clothes or for when you take your well-deserved coffee break. Life at home, while never dull, can sometimes be a little lonesome. My hope is that this podcast makes you feel like you have a friend with you as you go about your day. I'm so glad that you're here. Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Lattes and Laundry. I am recording this on a Monday morning and my kids are in the living room watching some cartoons. So we may have some visitors while I'm trying to record this. I wanted to record it earlier, but I got sidetracked with some things. But I've been sitting here trying to jot down some thoughts because today I wanted to talk about the aging conversation because I am 29. I will be 30 in January. And I would say over the last year or so, I have noticed really my first signs of aging. Now, I realize that I'm not old. I realize that I still would be considered young by most people's standards. So I'm sure what I consider aging is not the same as what other people consider aging. But I just basically mean that in the last year or so, I've started to notice fine lines. Our first visitor, hang on. Sorry about that. That's bound to happen many more times probably. So if I can't get a good recording in this morning, then I will just scrap it and start over. But basically what I mean by signs of aging is that I have found gray hairs and I've noticed fine lines that I didn't have before. And just overall, my hygiene and personal care routines have gotten longer. I just recently had to get glasses, so that's another thing that I've noticed. Just things here and there that I've noticed that have changed about me. And I, for a really long time, in my teens and early 20s, I did not have a skincare routine, really. I mean, I would wash my face, take off my makeup, but that was pretty much the extent of it. I just did not do a lot of things. And I am now noticing that I kind of have to do things. I used to never do things and nothing changed. And now I'm noticing that I've had to implement a skincare routine. I've had to, change some things about my personal care routine just to keep up with the things. Now, I have not done any kind of what I would call a tweakment. Don't have plastic surgery. I have not done Botox, and I'm not trying to say that it's wrong if you do. I'm just saying I have not, and I don't plan to. But I wanted to talk about just this whole conversation around aging, because for me, noticing these things has been a bit jarring, honestly, and I can understand why so many women my age are immediately running to Botox and things like that, because it is somewhat jarring the first time that you notice yourself starting to age. But I think that we've gotten to a point where people are so afraid of aging that we have just kind of lost it. We've kind of lost it. And I wanted to give you a statistic that I wrote down because when I was a kid, we had just had local antenna TV, and we would get all of those commercials all the time for facelifts. I would see constant commercials about, the neck lifts and facelifts where they would, this is their words, not mine. They would fix sagging necks and jowls, and most, if not all, of the women in the commercials, I would say were probably from mid-50s to early 70s, maybe late 40s, but they were all older women. And, that seemed to be the demographic that the plastic surgery industry was targeting. So I read a statistic that said that in the 2010s, the market had shifted, and that people in their 20s and 30s started seeking out Botox and fillers. Now, obviously, that's not a facelift, but what I'm trying to say is it seemed like all of that stuff was more marketed towards women in the late 40s to early 70s demographic, whereas it says in the 2010s, things started to shift around and people in their 20s and 30s were seeking out treatments. And then this source that I'm using is an article from The Guardian, and it says, now the most recent global survey from the International Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery has found that more than 2/3 of Botox users globally were under 50, and 24% were aged 18 to 34. And then it says the survey also found that non-surgical cosmetic procedures performed by plastic surgeons had increased by 58.8% from 2018 to 2022. I believe this article was dated in 2024. Yes, March 23rd of 2024. So it said that 2/3 of the Botox users globally were 50 and under, and 24% were age 18 to 34. And I know that a lot of us have probably seen the videos of all of these extremely young girls doing really long skincare routines. And I feel like I talked about in my last episode, the internet always, well, I don't know if I mentioned this, but we talked about the internet in my last episode. The internet always deals in extremes, it seems. And, we're going to talk about rage bait in another video. We're going to talk about consumerism. But things always seem to be taken to the extreme, and that the extremes are what are pushed out in the algorithm. And so I, like a lot of you, was seeing all of this content from these very young girls that are going into Sephora and Ulta and buying all of this expensive skincare stuff. And honestly, I think the whole, what's coined as the glow up culture, it's seeped its way into all different versions of personal care. I'm seeing so much content surrounding, and mostly I see it through commentary videos, but I'm seeing so much content surrounding skincare and anti-aging and products that you need to glow up and all of this stuff. And I think it is all mostly driven by consumerism. I'm going to link a commentary channel down below that I have found recently, and she covers a lot of these topics that she sees on TikTok, and I think she's a really good resource for a lot of this stuff. I'll specifically link the video that I watched not too long ago, and I believe it was about the skincare, and it was like shower routines. And honestly, a lot of the videos that I see where they're pushing a lot of product, even if it's not sponsored, but they're just saying, I use this product and that product, and it's honestly not even good for your skin to have that much stripping. So I'm going to leave that channel down below, but it does feel like it's gotten out of hand, and extremely young girls, like this statistic said 18 to 34. 18 is extremely young, in my opinion, to be getting Botox, because at 18 you don't have wrinkles yet. And at 18, the last thing you should be worrying about is getting wrinkles, in my opinion. But there's this thing, I like I said, my experience lately is noticing that I have some signs of aging, and it is kind of jarring. So I can understand why so many women freak out and they're afraid of aging, because it is, for lack of a better word, jarring to notice yourself changing. And I think also there's a lot of fear-mongering of getting older and looking older, as seen by like the glow up culture and, looking your hottest self and all of these skincare tips, and you need this product and that product to look good, to look hot, whatever. And it's always been that way. It's not just the fault of the internet. I mean, look at the tabloid magazines from the 2010s. That's specifically the era that comes to mind, where the paparazzi would take unflattering pictures of some celebrity and all the body shaming that happened on those tabloids. And then at the same time, there was all these magazines talking about celebrities with the best skin and how to look hot and how to look young. We have an obsession with looking young. And I say all of this not trying to say that trying to look your best self is a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. And in fact, I fall somewhere between, there's the aging gracefully, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And then there's this extreme consumer-driven plastic surgery, Botox, do all these things to look young, don't let yourself age. You want to stay looking young. I fall somewhere in between that because I don't want to let myself go. I want to maintain myself. I want to look nice as I get older. I want to, stay on top of skincare and try to kind of combat some of the wrinkles and stuff. I do, but I'm also not going to go to an extreme because I think for me, it leads to obsession. I am somebody who has always dealt with some body dysmorphia and things like that. And I have noticed that the more I stare in the mirror at my skin and the more I try to do for my skin, if I let myself become too fixated on it, it becomes a bit of an obsession. And I also feel like I'm getting a dysmorphia based around what I look like, what my skin looks like. And it's like the more I try to work on my skin, the worse my skin looks. And it's strange. It's strange because I do think that having a good skincare routine is important. And I've tried to do some research on what I actually need for my skin at my age and with my skin type and that kind of thing. But if I let myself obsess about it, I honestly start to get some dysmorphia about it. So I think I'm somewhere in between. I'm somewhere in between the Botox culture and the aging gracefully culture. And none of this is said to shame anyone, no matter what you want to do. That's up to your personal decision. And like I said, I understand why women are running to things like Botox and filler and things like that, because it does kind of take you back when you start to notice that you're aging. But I think it's kind of filtered down. This fear of aging has filtered down to a lot of the very young women who haven't even showed signs of aging. And so now there's preventative Botox and there's all of these things that people are getting done young to try to keep their face looking the same. But the thing is that we're all going to age, whether we want to or not. Time waits for no man. What is that great Dolly Parton quote? I'm going to see if I can look it up. It's a quote from one of my favorite, probably my favorite movie of all time, which is Still Magnolias. And it's a quote by Dolly Parton's character, Truvy. And she says, "Honey, time marches on and eventually you realize it's marching across your face." Like, we're all going to age. And I know that Dolly Parton is probably not the best example because, she's very outspokenly had a lot of procedures done to prevent her from looking old. But I just think that quote is so funny because it's true. Time waits for no man. Time is going to go. You're going to age. And you're going to look like you're aged. I feel like no matter what you do, you're going to look older. And there's nothing wrong with looking older. I'm not advocating that we let ourselves go completely, but I think that you can get all the Botox and filler and plastic surgery in the world, but eventually you're going to look your age. Maybe you won't look as old at a certain point, but at a certain point you're going to look older. I feel like I just talked in circles. I apologize. But you know what I'm saying. You can't stop the aging process forever. There is no fountain of youth that we're all going to drink and never age. And to a certain degree, your aging should be a thing of pride because it's a sign of life that you've lived. You've had the privilege, like a 60-year-old woman, that's a privilege that she lived to 60 years old. She earned those smile lines. She earned those forehead wrinkles and those fine lines, I think the problem is we just have such a fear of aging. And I think also something else I want to talk about is the fact that we have placed all of our value on the outer beauty. But before I get too far into that, I wanted to read you something from Melissa Gilbert. Melissa Gilbert played Laura Ingalls on the Little House on the Prairie TV series. And I remember years ago reading what she said about wanting to age gracefully. So I wanted to read that to you. And I will put all my sources down below. But this is from a website called Prevention. And it says, Melissa Gilbert reveals what happened when she decided to embrace aging. And at this point, she was 60. And it says that she spoke openly about leaving Hollywood to age. In other words, the actress intentionally got away from the pressures to maintain a youthful appearance with Botox, hair color, and the like, and moved to the other side of the country. Almost immediately, everything got easier, she recently explained. I finally found my feet as a woman, fully 100% strong in my own knowledge, in my accomplishments. Everything got easier, and a bonus, I have a lot more free time not staring in a mirror, sitting in a dermatologist chair, or sitting in a hair chair. It says when she lived for her life for the perception of others, Gilbert says she was unable to recognize herself. I had overfilled my face and lips. My forehead didn't move. I was still dyeing my hair red, she recalled. I was driving a Mustang convertible. I was a size 2 in an unhealthy way. I looked like a frozen version of my younger self, and that's not who I was. When she made the decision to start over, the now 60-year-old fully committed. I stopped coloring my hair, she explained. I had my breast implants removed. I decided to just be the best, healthiest version of myself without this pressure to look a certain way, and it paid off in a huge way. Now she thinks the experience of embracing aging has been remarkable. Quote, I love being this age, she explained. There are things about it that are not a lot of fun. I don't like it when my ankles ache in the morning or my skin is drier. Aging is not for sissies, but it is certainly better than the alternative, and I've never felt better in my skin. I hate to say that I don't think I'll ever not have half pint inside of me, she said. That little plucky, feisty, fiery girl is still there and is still very much the driver of everything I do. Sometimes she gets me in a little trouble, but she never goes away. I have a youthful spirit, but a wise old brain. So I remember reading that years ago about when she first decided. So this has got to be an old article. Well, no, it's actually not an old article. It's from 2024. But I remember reading about when she decided. So she must have decided prior to being 60 to stop doing that. I remember reading it several years ago where she had talked about how she had her breast implants removed and she had stopped getting Botox and filler and she'd stopped dyeing her hair and had decided to embrace aging gracefully. And I think that's an interesting thing, especially as somebody who would be considered a Hollywood celebrity, to make that decision, because especially how scrutinized celebrities are, because they're somebody in the public eye. And like I said, tabloids and gossip pages and things get a hold of every little thing about these celebrities and pick apart their appearance, which shouldn't happen, but we know it does. So for her to just decide she's going to stop all of that and just fully embrace her age and looking her age, I thought that was very beautiful and admirable that she did that, especially as somebody who has, she has some influence over people. And I especially like what she said about having a youthful spirit, but a wise old brain. And one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know if this applies or not, but I'm not sure who coined this quote, but it's something to the effect of, we don't stop playing because we get older. Let's see, am I going to get it right? We don't stop playing because we get older. We get older because we stop playing. And so I like that idea of continuing to embrace a youthful spirit and a youthful sense of play and imagination, even as your body gets older. I like what she said, because I think that a lot of women feel pressure to do different things to protect themselves from aging, because we've been so told by society that aging is an evil thing, is an evil that we must avoid. And however you choose to age is up to you. If you want to do cosmetic procedures, if you don't want to do anything and you want to just completely embrace the natural aging, or if you're somewhere in the middle, that's up to you. But I think that a lot of women feel pressured to do certain things to prevent themselves from aging, because society has told us that your beauty is what matters. That we've placed so much value on outward beauty that everybody's terrified to lose it. But like we've already talked about, eventually you're going to age. Even the Bible touches on this. And in the story of David, when Samuel goes to find the king, and God hasn't told him who the king is going to be yet. And he goes to Jesse's house and he's looking through Jesse's sons, and he looks at the oldest son and he thinks, surely this is the one. This is the one that he's chosen. But God says that man looketh upon the outward appearance, but God looketh on the heart. That is so applicable here, because we put so much value as humans. We put so much value on the outer appearance of everything instead of working on the inside and what truly matters. In Proverbs 31:30, it says, favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. There again is another example. I don't think there's anything wrong with being beautiful. There are many women in the Bible that are referred to as beautiful. Beauty is important. It's God is an artist. He designed us to be beautiful. And there's a lot to be said for, you are beautiful the way that God created you. But also, you have to work on the inside. You have to work on how you treat people, your character, your integrity, keeping yourself in check when you get an attitude, making sure that you're not ugly on the inside. Because if you're ugly on the inside, it doesn't matter how beautiful you are on the outside. But according to society's standards, beauty on the outside is all that matters, and we're all so afraid of losing it. Another thing that I think is interesting, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the aging conversation and the beauty conversation, is the changing of beauty standards and body standards and that kind of thing throughout decades and centuries. If you look at women's clothing over the years, you can kind of see where the beauty standard was according to where the clothing was. And then as recent as the 90s, like you look at what the ideal beauty standard body type was in the 90s and early 2000s, was very thin. You wore the very low-rise jeans, Same thing in the 20s. It used to be very thin. The clothing was very drop waist. There was not a curvy silhouette wasn't popular. But then you look at the 1950s and the curvy silhouette was popular. And then the 2010s, 2020s, the slim thick was the word for the body type. And I'm not saying that it's wrong if you naturally fit into the beauty standard. That's great. That's not wrong. But so many times people feel pressured to alter themselves to fit the beauty standard. But the thing is, beauty standards change all the time. The ideal hairstyle, the ideal body type, the ideal clothing type, all of that changes constantly. And same thing with trends. Trends change constantly. And there's nothing wrong with trying out trends. Sometimes it can be fun, but you shouldn't alter yourself to fit a trend, just like you shouldn't alter yourself to fit a beauty standard, because it's always changing. And I think that's, with everything so loud now, because it used to be tabloid magazines and beauty magazines and whatever. Now it's, you open your phone and you're bombarded with, 10 tips, 10 products you need to avoid aging, or how to be the hot girl this summer, or on and on and on it goes. And like I said before, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to look your best self. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to try things. I try things. I try out different skincare products. I change up my makeup routine every so often. I dye my hair. I like to do my nails. And, sometimes trends are fun to try out. I think it's fun to try different beauty things and try different skincare routines and to enjoy your routines. And I enjoy my personal care routine, and I want to whiten my teeth. My teeth have been very stained by a coffee, things like that, cosmetic things. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wearing makeup and enjoying that kind of thing. I do. And I'm also not against the glow up altogether. I feel like everybody goes on a personal care journey at some point, and I myself feel like I've been on one. I've been working out for a year, trying to work on my personal fitness and strength. I've developed my skincare routine and a makeup routine that works. I figured out what my body type was so that I could dress for my body type. I've also had a color season analysis done. Things like that I find super interesting, and I like to learn about how to dress for myself and how to look pretty. I think all of that stuff is fun. I'm not against that kind of thing. To sum this up, I think that no matter how you choose to age, I think we need to let go of all the societal pressure and the fear-mongering surrounding aging, because aging is a privilege and aging is a beautiful thing. And I myself have had my own fears of growing older, my own fears of what I'll look like when I'm, X years old. And as I think a lot of women do, especially at my age when you start to notice things. And, I have my little things that I'm doing so that I can age well, my skincare routines and different things that I'm doing for that. But I think I don't want to be afraid to get older. I don't want to be afraid. I don't want to spend all my time in a mirror worrying about every new line that I get. In fact, speaking of new lines, I recently got sunburned and I wore SPF that day. I wear a daily SPF, but I was just in the sun too much and I got sunburned and looked in the mirror and saw a new forehead wrinkle. And I have always had forehead wrinkles. It's a genetic thing that comes from my family. I've had them my whole life pretty much. But I had a brand new one from getting sunburned. And that freaked me out a little bit. I'm not going to lie. But I think that I don't want to fear getting older. I don't want to fear aging. I want to embrace aging, even if, even though I'm not going to just not do my skincare routine and not try to take care of myself and not try to look pretty. I still want to try to do all that thing and all that stuff and, all the stuff I've already talked about. But I don't want to live in fear and constantly obsess about every line that I get just because there's so much pressure on women. Because women are highly scrutinized for how we look and how we age. All of these anti-aging products are all marketed towards women. Like I talked about the tabloids earlier as well. Those are women that are being scrutinized for their bodies and their weight gain and their skin and their aging and their hair and all of that stuff. Women are very much put under the microscope because there is such a value put on outward beauty. But I think that we need to not give in to the fear-mongering of aging. We need to not be scared to death of getting older. We need to not place so much value on the outward appearance that we forget to look at the inward appearance. So I hope that was helpful to you. I hope that was encouraging. I hope I did not offend anyone. That was not my intention. Like I've said a couple of times, how you choose to age is your own business and it's a personal decision. But I still think even if you choose to age differently than maybe I am, I still don't want you to be afraid of aging. I think we should look at it as something beautiful and as a privilege and as a journey. Because I hope to one day look at myself in the mirror as an old lady and think about all the life that I've lived and all the memories that I've had and all the love that I've had and not be obsessing about every single line. So I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, please leave me a comment and let me know. Let me know if you have any other topics that you would like me to cover in the podcast. And I hope you all have a great week and I will talk to you next time. Bye.